It's a great day to play, everybody! Welcome on into the channel, yeah! Whether it's your first time here or you're rejoining us, thank you for being here with us today. Your love appreciated, always welcome here, and you are enough. Now, today, we're gonna be getting into Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the Japanese version. But before we do that, I'm gonna do it in two parts because again, I think that some people like the regular reaction and some people like the analysis portion. And because of how intense these are getting, it's also helped me a little bit to watch them all the way through. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna watch the whole thing all the way through. I'm gonna react to it no different than a just regular video, not really keeping the BU in mind for that. We're just gonna talk about the sound, the imagery, things like that. And then after that, then we're gonna go back and we're gonna piece it apart and we're gonna talk about the BU. Now, if you've been enjoying the journey or if you wanna see our BU journey up to this point, because I think that there's bare minimum like 10 plus videos out about the BU up to this point, please go like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when our videos come out, and you can check our live streams as well. But without further ado, let's do this.
Sweeter than sweet, chocolate cheeks and chocolate wings. But so no hot milk, I couldn't die. Yakuni sweet dog, I beat every die. Kiss me, push, cool, demo, eat, caramo, it's so she needs to get tackled. Baby, you're the shit, demo, give me your name. You're risky, you're risky. Just love me,
Okay, a couple of things. One, this is like a psychedelic dream right now. Like it is, this feels like what it would be like if, you know, you were in the Beatles era watching like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds on LSD. It's crazy. But the thing that always amazes me when they take Korean songs or songs that are originally just written in Korean and then turn them into Japanese lyrics is just that, like, I just want to know what like the process is to go through that to make that work. Because when I did my cover and was trying to take I Need You and turn them into English lyrics and still keep that, like, I don't feel like there was probably a way that I could have perfectly kept the essence of it. And maybe it's just not. Maybe there's just, you know, it's loosely around it. But it just always amazes me when they do that and keep those cadences the same. And like, it's so cool here. So cool here. I love the way this sounds. It's just, the use of color here is just so, and it's clearly meaningful, but it's gorgeous. Is that Jin? Okay. So crazy. That really reminds me, is it no? Is it no N.O? Where they have like the sheets that are like hanging down that are kind of like pink and in their white room when they're dancing, and it almost looks kind of like the inside of like the human brain or the human body. Like that's what that reminded me of in that moment. Money. Oh, wow. That's really cool. Okay. Huh.
준영. 오랜만이다.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. Okay. So visually speaking, just on its own, like this is absolutely gorgeous, which is, I feel like it's a hard way to follow up because Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the MV, even not looking at through a BU lens, I think was just absolutely visually stunning. Out of, I think, all of their music videos that I've seen up to this point, it is probably the one that I think sticks out the most to me. And it makes sense, like it has a ton of views on it, but there's just a lot of artistry in there. Again, even if you don't understand the BU and all the things that are going on in it, it is just gorgeous. And there's just this temptation and good versus evil aspect just on the underlying front of it. And this almost feels like it's like an offshoot of that. Like if you didn't understand the BU and you were just coming into this, it's kind of like, it almost feels as if though when Jin is looking into the painting in the K version of this, that this is what like is possibly going on in his mind. I don't know if that makes sense, but it almost is like that, and it's just very, very cool to see them piece the two together and bring in all those colors and stuff and a lot of the things from the first one into this one. And I'm super, super excited to get into the BU portion of this. But I'm always just really, really impressed. I really, really love their Japanese MVs. I wish they got a little bit more attention, but I think part of the issue is, especially from a reactor standpoint, is a lot of times the Japanese stuff tends to get blocked. They're harder to do live streams. Like there's a lot of other things that go into that. So, but really, really gorgeous here. And the song just in itself is just so good. It's so good. So anyway, guys, that's going to be the end of the regular video reaction. But if you want to stick around and check out what happens with the BU in the analysis, we have so much to talk about. So let's do that. Okay, I am going to just start just playing this through because there's so much, and there was this little pieces that I picked up as we went along. So I just want to start off right at the very beginning. I find this kind of interesting where he's lying on the bed, and then as it opens. Okay. This reminds me of Jin because we have a white bed, we have the white window with the light peering through, and we're waking up out of the bed. And I still think that with the different meanings and stuff like that, I think that Jin is dead in one of these ways. In one of the theories that I have is Jin has actually already died. And because of the way that it affects all of them, I'm guessing that it was a very, very tragic death or something like a suicide, because we also see a lot of suicidal thoughts or suicidal tendencies with the other members. And I think that if we look at a literal sense of things with the literal story breakdowns, I think that then Jin is dead, and then that is kind of the catalyst or the butterfly effect that ends up leading to all of these things happening to the other members. That's one. The second one is that even regardless of whether he died or not, is that he has somehow the ability to alter or thinks, I don't necessarily know that he has it, but I think that he thinks that he has the ability to alter these things from happening. And so we see a lot of different timelines, but it's always like it's looking through Jin's eyes, but Jin's always kind of like not really present. It's almost like he's trying to affect things, or that he's watching it from the outside in. And that with some of the things that have happened, like I think that he might think with the way that things are going that maybe he can change some of those events. Because we see a lot of things where like he's in the photos, but he's not in the photos, you know, where he's taking the shots, he's not taking the shots, or things that are very, very similar, which we're going to see again in this, where the members are actually doing the actions that I think that Jin was maybe doing himself. So that's the second portion. And the third portion is that all of this is happening within Jin's head. Is that Jin is having a hard time letting go, or having a hard time going on into adulthood or whatever it may be. And so that all of this is happening within Jin's head, and that each one of these, while they were real at one point in time, represents a piece of Jin. And this is where we're gonna continue to talk about Damien a lot, because we see it again in this video. There's obviously with the painting, the same painting that you see here, there's this good and evil representation. And in that sense, it's not necessarily that the boys are dead versus that they've killed off their innocent self. They've accepted the good and the evil inside themselves, which is basically Abraxas is the god of both good and evil, and that they're moving on into adulthood, that they're moving on into their maturity. And even the sides of the rooms here, like this whole thing kind of represents or looks like a butterfly, right? Like the way that his back goes up, we have these straight lines here, and these are kind of like wings that come off. And as we continue to go, we actually see on the bed, if I remember correctly later, that there was wings on the bed, on his back, which we'll come back to. Now, here we're seeing, and this is why I think that a lot of this is happening within Jin's mind. We're going to come back to One Piece later, but I actually think that this whole house is the same house from Awake. The rooms actually look very, very similar. The type of furniture that they're using in them looks very, very similar. The type of lighting, and I think that they're kind of different compartments in Jin's mind that's happening as he's trying to go through and fix things. But we have like the blue, which is more of like a tranquil feeling. Jimin has the apple again here, which is definitely the representation of temptation. And when we talk about it in terms of Damien, this was the beginning of the downfall for Sinclair, when he lies about the apple, literally lies about stealing the apple from the garden. We have the whole Adam and Eve thing. And again, if you want to know more about all of those, please go back. I have a separate BU theory playlist where you can go back to the beginning and you can kind of see what we're talking about when we talk about some of these things. But there's one light here and everything else is blue in the room. And I think there's kind of this tranquil feeling right before he's sitting in temptation, where we're looking at like the apple and we're like, okay, is this the moment? Is this going to clear me? Is this going to free me? And we also see later that Suga's going to be in that room. Now, this portion I think is very, very interesting because V is the only person that's moving here, where everybody else is kind of like stuck still. Now, this could also be the release of V, because V also, we think, died. He jumped, right? And possibly drowned. But I also think this is because V is probably in terms of the Damien book, V is probably the most grown-up, darkest side. So V is likely to be like the Damien of it. And we've talked about that before, where he is leading Jin, Sinclair. Jungkook is Jin's youngest side, is leading him through his youth and through his innocence and coming out the other side, which is why he's the one that stabbed his father, which is why we're going to see here that he almost looks like he's stabbing Jin, and we're going to come back to that. There is so much going on in here. He also kind of looks like he's in a daze here, which would make me believe that like he is kind of like waking up in a sense here. We see like he's kind of like in a blue, but there's like a red fog around him. So it's almost like there's still this clarity point in him. There probably is still this youth point in him that is trying to break free, but he is completely over the edge on this point. There it is. So we have these wings on the bed, which kind of represents the rebirth aspect of it. We talked about once they've kind of given up childhood or given up their innocence, then they move into that, they hatch out of their egg and they come out of that egg, you know, a fully fledged adult, and they're reborn. And this is a really, really big thing, obviously, in Damien. Now, the difference with Jungkook, though, versus the other ones is I think Jungkook was forced to lose his innocence, obviously, because he dies early. And so this whole thing that's happening, like this isn't a reality right now. This is probably happening in Jin's mind around the same time that Awake is happening, I'm guessing. I think that the Blood, Sweat, Tears K version and the Blood, Sweat, and Tears J version both are happening in Jin's mind and part of his reality in terms of when Awake happens. And this is part of his awakening, is realizing the things that are actually happening and going on. But within that, we see the rebirth aspect of it. And because each one of them are a part of Jin, as Jin is realizing that he has accepting his fate or accepting what's happening, whether it's accepting his debt, accepting his loss of innocence, whatever it is, that each one of these individuals then has to do the same because they are part of Jin at this point, or part of Jin's destiny. So he's looking at the good versus evil, the angels versus demons painting, seeing that there's two sides fighting. Okay, and then we come to that, which is really, really interesting. So this goes in a backwards order. In the K version, they have that happening at the very, very end. All the boys are running out, and they're basically following V, who is kind of like the ringleader, if you want to call. I don't really like using the terms good and evil versus awakened and unawakened, because we're kind of like looking at it through the Damien lens. And so, like, yes, through technically he doesn't have his innocence anymore, and that's seen as evil. But I don't think that V is some monster. Yes, he killed his dad, but a lot of this is metaphoric. And even if he really killed his dad, I mean, technically there's some justification there. So with that loss and everything, V is kind of like the ringleader in that. He's Damien, he's the oldest. He's leading Sinclair and all the pieces of Sinclair through this. And then Jin stops. And that all happens at the very, very end when Jin accepts that. And his face starts breaking apart and the mask starts breaking apart. But in this version, we see it backwards. We start with that. We start with V covering the eyes, and then we're seeing all these things happen, which is almost why I think that, again, because this entire thing is happening in Jin's head, because all of these are pieces of Jin, just like in Damien, that all of the pieces are part of Sinclair, that I think that when he's looking in the painting and gets lost in that beginning portion, that this is part of what he's seeing. And so he's like kind of reliving that moment because like in his head, he's got this fractured reality. And now we're kind of seeing what was going on in his head when he was actually examining the painting at the beginning. So that portion, very, very important. So we have the different pair settings. We had the original pair settings, which were like kind of like the relationship type pairs that we had going on. And then now we have the pairs that are on the ink blots, the wings ink blots. And in the K version, we saw that Suga was, I don't know if it was necessarily tempting him or teaching him, but we have basically the older members, the evil members, basically guiding along the younger members. And again, this is the whole point of Damien, is that Damien is a guide for Sinclair as he goes through, and he meets all these other guides and mentors along the way. And each one of them kind of represents a different portion, but each one of them is also Sinclair. And so Suga, which represents Pistorius, the organ player in Damien, is now talking to one of Sinclair's younger selves, which is Jimin, the more innocent one, and is definitely trying to tempt him. And when he put the blindfolds on him at first, Jimin kind of accepted that in the K version, but then he was trying to break away from it, almost like he wasn't ready to accept that, like he was still fighting it. And I think that same thing is happening here. He hasn't bitten into the apple in this portion. And so I think that Suga is trying to get him to kind of like accept fate, accept his adulthood, accept whatever it is, but Sugar is trying to basically be the person that's getting him to accept that, and Jimin's having a really hard time coming to terms with that. And this is also why I think that these all kind of converge with the Wing short films that are happening at the time, because in the short film and at the end of this, Jimin bites the apple, and in Lie, and in here he hasn't bitten the apple yet, but we see a lot of like kind of like the white and blue motifs happening. And so we have, I think, while this is happening, I don't know if it's talking about Suga in Lie, about like, you know, you told me that this was going to fix everything and it wasn't, as kind of like the mentor aspect. That I'm not sure about, but we definitely see mentors leading youth. Okay. And we also have that here with RM now leading Jungkook, because they are a pair as well. The reflections again. Now he chooses the apple. So this is interesting. Okay, this is going to turn green in a second. I notice this. So the drink is the apple. Okay, they're synonymous. We talked about this before. Green definitely a lot of times is kind of like seen as like potions and stuff like that. But the apple is kind of the loss of innocence. So by putting the apple in the blender, he's basically showing the representation that he chews the apple. He puts the rest of the apple in the blender. You can definitely tell there's an apple in the blender here. You can see the seeds, and it turns green right as RM's lifting the cup up. So it's the affirmation of the temptation aspect, and each one of the elders kind of leading in the younger selves. At this point, though, if Jungkook is dead, then you might question okay, well, why is this all still happening? Why is he still trying to lead him, whatever it is? And this is where I still think that this is happening in Jin's head, because each one of them represents a portion of Sinclair / Jin from youth onward, and then Jin is basically acting as the overall guide, like watching it all happen from the outside in, coming to acceptance with himself in a non-literal sense. And in a literal sense, I think in a non-literal sense, in Jin's head, this is how he has to compartmentalize the things that have happened to him, or the things that have happened after his death, or whatever it is, by kind of having these different parts of him help guide his younger selves. So obviously we have this mentor aspect, but I think in the Wing series specifically, we're seeing more of an internal psyche thing happening with Jin and his internal self, with Awake and all of that stuff. I think that this is all happening within Jin's mind. Whereas in I Need You and Run, I think that those showed a lot more of the literal things that were happening in their lives that were going on, and some of the events that transpired or are going to transpire. And this is more of a Jin having a problem coping with the things that are happening. So the blue happens, we have a chord of awakening here, and now he's in the back of Jin's truck, which I think is interesting. Again, because if you look at it, Jin's not actually in the pictures when the truck is there, and I do think that it's actually Jin's truck, but that's why I also think that this is all happening in his mind, because each one of these represent a portion of him. Now that drops, and he ends up throwing it up, almost like he's having a hard time accepting it. And now he's watching these kind of relationships break and fracture. And we actually do see this because it's not Jungkook the one that breaks and fractures. It's Suga that actually gets violent with Jungkook early on. But it's more of, I think that he's seeing that inside his head, he's seeing him having a harder time dealing with the events that are happening inside, dealing with moving on in a non-literal sense. And then in a literal sense, if Jin is actually dead already, then he is maybe watching in like purgatory, which this could also represent purgatory. He's watching as like an angel or something like that, watching the events of the boys going through all of these things. And it's a hard time for him to deal with, which is why I think that maybe he thinks that somehow he can have an impact on it. And that's why he tries to insert himself in all of these things, but he's not really there. We have the second Jimin coming in, which I think is just more of his youth trying to protect himself still, covering his mouth, don't eat the apple. Now that part was interesting because I think that, we're going to go back a little bit here. I think that was J-Hope, I'm guessing, because J-Hope's the one that shoots the arrow at V to begin with, and it looked like he was holding a dart. Yeah. So I think this is J-Hope holding a dart, and in the last one we see him shoot him. This is the last pair, right? The elder and the younger, and I think that there's this trying to save him, even though the dart is green in this case, which could technically represent temptation. It's not. I actually think it's the opposite. I think that in this case, it's the one where it's Jin's younger self. It's one of the youths, like, because J-Hope represents the Eve portion, the mother, the maternal mother. So technically it's his innocent self, but the motherly portion that's trying to bring V back from what he's going through. And it clearly doesn't work for whatever it is. But I think that's what he's trying to do. I think he's trying to purge V of that with the dart. And there was the arrow. So he's looking at V. So now we see him kind of like pouring in. Now, I don't know if this is supposed to be like that they're making like drug Wapatui. I don't really think that that's what's here. I think that it's a letting go thing. I think that it is a, if J-Hope really has Munchausen syndrome, that like, okay, I don't need the pills anymore. Like, I'm accepting my fate because I am going to finally grow up, and a giving in thing. But V is paying obviously very close attention to this. And ironically, Jin is the one kind of sitting back there, like just emotionless as all of this is happening. While everybody else is very, very interested. Okay. This is the part that makes me almost 99% certain that this is all happening in Jin's head at the time. So first off, I don't think that there would probably ever come a time when Jin would actually attack V like this, and that V would ever attack him back. I think that this is Jin's younger self realizing that V, his older self, the Damien aspect, has gotten completely out of control, and that he's fighting back against that as kind of a last-ditch effort. And we have these flowers here. I don't know if there's two that are red because there's two people that are already dead. I'm not really certain as to what this represents. But this fight is very, very important because obviously V didn't kill Jin. It's his internal psyche that isn't letting go. But we're going to see later it's going to come back, and we're going to revisit this with RM of why I think this is all happening and why they're all the same person inside Jin's head. So the poison is in you and it tastes like the Holy Grail. And it's because, again, that's kind of the acceptance that they're all the same person. And when Jin stabs him, when he stabs himself, because Jungkook represents the youngest, most innocent version of Sinclair. This is Sinclair before he steals the apple from the garden. And then Sinclair, when he steals the apple from the garden, is Jimin. And we went on all those characters in previous episodes. But when he does that, he essentially frees Sinclair, and Sinclair is now acceptance. Now, in the book, this is really, really important. We visited this in the last one. Sinclair is in a bed looking over at Damien. And at the end, he kisses Damien, which is why Jin ends up kissing the angel at the end. And he kisses Damien, but then realizes Damien's not there. And Damien basically tells him, like, I'm within you, because he's finally accepting that it is all part of him. It's the self-love portion. And this Jungkook sitting here on the bed, kind of waking up, reminds me of the very same thing. Like, this is that awakening moment. And that's also why we see the glass shatter here, and we see the glass shatter with Jin at the very end, because these moments are basically simultaneously happening because they're both the same person. But there's another point in the book that happens in here in the final chapter, and it's happening multiple times. It's the awakening moment. And in the final chapter, Sinclair goes outside and he talks about that he's looking up at the sky, and the sky, it basically just starts like torrential downpouring, and like it looks like it's just going to be this terrible, terrible storm. And out of it, like this almost like explosion of colors happens, and it looks like a phoenix kind of spreading its wings and flying up to the sky. And this really represents Sinclair's beginning of his rebirth moment, which is what we're seeing here. And I don't know if you can look at this, but like if we trace this figure right here, these look like wings opening up, right? Here's the head, and then here's the wings opening up. And this scene just reminds me very much so of that moment. And we're going to see later in the sky when it's like green and dark, like that, like that's V's moment, where he's also seeing the sky. Like these things are all happening at the same time. And it just reminds me of that scene in Damien where we see that happening. So now he's got seemingly the same thing that he probably just tried to stab Jin with to awaken him. And he's going up and like carving all of these things into assumably Jin's mind. But this is where his awakening moment is too. So I didn't want to say this before. This not only reminds me of the scene from NO or No. We have the lone wolf thing now because again, he is the furthest along. He is the most mature version or the most adult version of Sinclair. And so like he's basically on his own leading the rest of the people. But the way that this gets smaller and the way that it kind of looks, it's almost like a birth. Like the way that he comes out, if you look at this, it almost kind of looks like it would be like a birth canal. And then he comes out of this very, very small opening to come out into this dark void. It's just very, very interesting. And we see like the back and forth between the red and the blue, the good versus the innocent. And then this part reminds me of before that happens, of that moment right before. And Damien is obviously the one that leads Sinclair to that moment. So this makes sense because this is what the sky, when they describe in Damien looking up at the sky and it looking like this storm and it gets dark, this is what it looks like right before that rebirth happens. And then the house kind of with the glowingness kind of represents the egg before the rebirth. Very, very cool. And there's that same moment. Now, I can't tell, but a lot of these things look like they're from previous things. I'm just going to go back here. This, I know that this didn't necessarily look like it was here, but this almost looks like the same type of sink and mirror with the stains and stuff on it that were in the beginning episodes with J-Hope when he was first down. We have the smoke coming in here, kind of taking Jungkook over. This hallway, though, this is where I was like, this is all happening. This hallway looks like almost an identical hallway. If you take the Abraxas wallpaper away, this almost looks like the same type of hallway or the same hallway that we saw previously with Jin, that Jin's walking down in a wake. And then when he goes into the room, he's trying to rescue his younger self. The different part of him is trying to rescue his younger self. And the moment he opens the door, he can't. And he grabs the apple, and then he goes back, and there's his awakening moment. So cool. And then it shows each one of their awakenings. Okay, that happened really, really quick. We're going to come back to this because this is very important, because of the reflections and stuff. This, it's really, really hard to see right here. This is like a mirror room that he's in. So this whole thing is like the glass shattering. He's realizing it, but like there's here, if you just look down the path of this, and if you see this back here and here, this is a mirror room. So all of these portions are reflections of Jin's self. And that's also why RM was seeing it earlier. But this is, again, this is the nail for me. This is why I think... So the person that should have the bloodied hands like this is Jin. Because Jin's the one that just got into a fight with V. So the fact that RM has the bloodied hands like this, I think represents two things. One, it just confirms that all of this is actually happening in Jin's mind and that they're all the same person. In this scenario, with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, that all of this is kind of happening in this alter universe or in their minds. The second thing is in a literal sense, I think that RM is probably responsible when we saw the phone booths and stuff like that, because he didn't answer V's calls because he wasn't there for V. You know, it said liar on there. So he probably told V that he'd already be there and he wasn't there for whatever reason. Something happened to him or he just chose not to. That sends V down his spiral in the literal world. And so the blood is literally on RM's hands. But with Jin, the other thing could possibly be that maybe all of them also feel some kind of guilt as well. If Jin's actually the one that's dead, that they feel like that they could have stopped it. So there's all this tie-in with them in here, and it's just gorgeous. And that's why, like, there are people, and I mentioned comments, that there's so many interpretations of this, and people have like mentioned like, no, they have one ending and this is absolutely the way that it is. And you know, it's like, but they have used alliteration from books for a reason. So you can't ignore the good versus evil and the innocence thing, and you can't ignore Sinclair's whole storyline when they literally use chapters of the book for each one of the Wing storylines, and that there's this overarching, encompassing story here as well, and in a non-literal sense of the story of the innocence being lost and growing up and being reborn, which is very, very different from, I think, the literal stories here that are happening, and probably very, very different from the butterfly effect thing that's also happening and going on. And then all these stories. And then here we finally see where, like, this is where the glass is shattering and he's realizing, like, this happened the same time. V's made the jump. V's made the leap. This is basically the hole that he has to now go into, because every other piece of him has accepted it, and now it's his time to finally start accepting it because he's now awake. He's now realizing what's going on. And then this is because, again, we have, I think this was J-Hope back here. Let's just go through this again. Okay. I think that this is J-Hope. I can't really tell, but it makes sense that the most innocent member is now covered in the darkness with just kind of like the wings up there, because everybody is starting to accept their fate at this point in time. I think that there is this hope, no pun intended. I think that there is a hope that, like, there is still a way to change the turn of events. And I think that J-Hope has been trying to fight that, the more innocent side of him, the one that didn't have, I believe, a mother, which is why he's so attached to Eve and is now trying to be that motherly figure and trying to take care of everybody else. I think that there is still some hope left, but it's dwindling very, very quickly. And the glass shatters because, again, we're back in Awake. So all of that, now this is very, very cool what happens, but yes, all of this then is happening in all of Awake, all of the Wing short films is happening in Jin's mind. And now we're back to reality.
오랜만이다.
So in terms of timeline, in terms of events, I don't know this yet. And I think that that's where we're going to start seeing things. I don't know if this is... I think that this is probably earlier on, because if Jin is dead, then this couldn't be happening right now. But this is back in the real world and going through their real life story. And so part of Awake is him coming probably back to and saying like, okay, well, how can I change it? How can I set things right? How am I going to do these things? You know, and this is where we're going to have to watch more to find out how this ends and how this all ties in. But I do, this whole thing has just been so wonderful. And we have the eyes closing right here at the end. This whole thing has been so wonderful so far, and they put so many pieces in each video. Like I just don't understand like the amount of thought and work that had to go into this concept is just astronomical. It really is. And is just brilliant, beyond brilliant. But again, I still think it leaves open multiple interpretations. I think that, and to sum it up again at the end here, we're going to talk through it, that one is a very literal sense, where these boys are obviously childhood friends, whatever it is, something happens to them. And I don't know if it's that Jin died, but something happened to them and sprung this whole chain of events that then makes them spiral. If they're not together anymore, whatever it is, they start spiraling out of control. And I think from Jin being here and he's saying long time no see, that there is a potential that Jin has probably been away. You know, he is the oldest, so it would make sense that maybe he was away, maybe he was in school, maybe something was happening and he comes back and is trying to put all these pieces back together, regardless of whether it's his death or not, that there's a literal story happening there. Then we have the whole coming of age of coming to youth, and that's the whole Damien overarch, right? Where it is, you know, this good versus evil, this youth versus adulthood aspect of coming to terms with that, and then that journey that each one of them represents, and that, you know, we have the different boys represent different parts of Sinclair throughout that, the different mentors and things like that that are happening. And then the third portion of this is this butterfly effect portion, where if, regardless of whether Jin's dead or not dead, this non-acceptance, acceptance, whatever, whether it's happening from purgatory, whether it's happening from death, because clearly there's a lot of supernatural-ish type of things that are seeming here, that I don't know if Jin thinks that he can change it by the way that he records things, by the way that he looks through the lens, by the way that he's taking his pictures. I don't know if that's something that can happen. I don't know if there's events that are happening, but I think that has to be in here as well. And I think a lot of them overarch, but I don't think that there's just room for one. I think there's multiple things going on here, and some of them are more hidden than others, if that makes sense. But anyway, another long video, as all of these always are, and I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you guys. I'm hoping that you guys are enjoying the journey. It's really tough because like when I'm doing this, like I don't have some of this planned. I know that obviously I've gone through and we've reread all of Damien again. So again, if you haven't, go back and watch this from the beginning so you can really get into that, because I took some time to study and read that and interpret all of those pieces. So if you're coming into this video and haven't read or seen those interpretations, you're probably going to be a little bit lost and confused. So definitely recommend going back and doing that. But now that we're doing this, a lot of these are literally me just sitting down and watching it and then just coming up with these theories as we go. So some of it's a lot of word dumping, I'm sure, and maybe it doesn't always make sense to you guys the way that it makes sense in my mind, because I'm probably all over the place. But I'm hoping that you're enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun with this, and it's been tremendous. So thank you guys. Leave your comments below, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you already haven't. If nobody told you that they love you today, don't forget, I love you. You're appreciated, always welcome here, and you are enough. And last but certainly not least, it was a great day to play. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.